From Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI to tantalizing new images of a Tesla Cybercab without mirrors on the streets of Austin, Texas, and Elon revealing key timelines and use cases for Tesla AI 5, 6, and 7 chips. Plus, what's up with Greenland? Why is President Trump turning the tariff screws on European allies? All that and more with Larry Goldberg. Larry is a serial entrepreneur, co-inventor, and author and managing partner of Lumacenti. Welcome, Larry. Great to have you on, and thanks for taking the time to chat.
Thanks, Roden. Great to be here.
So much to talk about, but I think we should begin with the spicy lawsuit. It's getting spicier. The spice must flow, I know, but who would have thought? Diary entries, text messages, late night emails. Oh man, the disclosure, the discovery has thrown up quite a few tantalizing tidbits about what really went on behind the scenes, and it is shocking. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you. I'm not going to inflame any wild thoughts here. I am very skeptical of press reports of, passages or extracted passages from legal documents. It's very difficult to judge exactly what the context of the quoted passages are and how important they are. And so when you read that Elon said this and this guy said the other, you have no clue in the press piece what the context of each person saying that. In fact, this article is, says one thing, and then one of the participants come back and say, well, that was taken out of context because the context was this. And then the other guy will say, it's crazy. If you want to read the entire court procedures, that's a whole different matter. And I haven't done that. I've read the same, snippets as you have, but I just live by my tenet not to take anything in the press seriously before I go to the original documents. So, as in the court case that we had with Elon being sued, for $9 billion or whatever, because of his award, his payroll reward. I just don't take these things seriously until I read the court documents. And once I read the court documents, I discover an entirely different world, very different color, and then I can comment. So with respect, I wouldn't take any of these publications seriously.
But that's why we love talking to you, Larry, because you keep us grounded.
Yeah, and if I'd read the court documents, maybe it would be better. But remember, we're getting depositions from each side.
Right.
So even if you read the depositions, it's probably not enough until there's cross-examination.
Yeah.
Because what each party will write will be representative of their particular perspective.
Yes.
They will, leave out what they don't want discussed. They will. So I would just say to you, let's hold back a little bit. Let's see what happens. Clearly, Elon is really miffed, really angered by what went down. And on the face of it, he put up $38 million as the opening finance for this organization.
Yeah.
It was registered as a nonprofit. Somehow he was removed from it, or he removed himself. We don't know the full circumstances yet. We've got various people saying different things, but ultimately it became worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. And the question is, how does a non-profit suddenly become a for-profit?
But just to play devil's advocate, there are also those who would say that Elon was naive in not taking care of the legalities.
I'm
I
sorry,
get
he's not.
there are many who would say that Elon was naive in not taking care of the legalities, even for a non-profit, not insulating him from risks, not ensuring
Yeah,
that legally there was no way that they could turn it into a for-profit entity.
I, this is such a difficult aspect of the law. This whole nonprofit. In fact, I made a tweet about nonprofits, or I read it. Sorry, I read a tweet about nonprofits earlier today that looked pretty damning. And then I did some research into nonprofits, and I mean, our taxes, about 7 to 9%, somewhere between 7 and 9% of our total taxes are because we allow nonprofits to deduct to not pay taxes. And the truth is, many of those nonprofits are not really charitable organizations. They are organizations that really, really cross the line to what we believe, or what I certainly believe, but I think what most of us believe is nonprofit activity. So, I have a whole conversation about healthcare in my postings, and I have a very significant healthcare publication about the cost to our healthcare system, let alone our tax deficit, by allowing these major hospital monopolies or duopolies or local duopolies to be non-profit. Anyway, I'll get off that and just say that I can't comment yet because I don't think we have all the knowledge. We don't have all the information. And I'm very anxious to hear this court case because I think
Yes.
we're going to hear a lot more than we have heard to date.
Yeah, for sure. If I think these documents were unsealed, discovery documents were unsealed around the 6th of this month, and they've already created such a storm. But I do want to get your thoughts on these series of posts from Elon and Sam Altman and Greg Brockman. Let's just take a look at the first one, where Elon says he can't wait to start the trial. Discovery and testimony will blow your mind. Kauchi was putting it. This was on the 16th of Jan, putting the chance of Elon winning the case at 57%. It's a bit higher right now. Sam then responded. There was a series of posts from him. He said, lots more here. OpenAI. Elon is cherry picking things to make Greg look bad, but the full story is that Elon was pushing for a new structure. Greg and Ilya spent a lot of time trying to figure out if they could meet his demands. I remember a lot of this, but here's the part I had forgotten. Elon said he wanted to accumulate $80 billion for a self sustaining city on Mars, that he needed and deserved majority equity. He said he needed full control since he'd been burned by not having it in the past. And when we discussed succession, he surprised us by talking about his children controlling AGI. I want to pause for a moment and talk about this, because this is a question that we should be asking generally about who controls AGI, who controls Grok at a point where it reaches AGI and then ASI. Is it the shareholders? Is it the government? Is it Elon because he will have controlling stake in these companies? Because whoever controls it, assuming Grok will be one of the top most powerful AI models, you will essentially be controlling society in such a big way.
I think the notion that any particular piece of technology is going to, quote, control AGI, unquote, is an extraordinarily low chance. I think that AGI is a concept that in its realization will be very different to the way we think about it. AGI will be no different from the level of distributed knowledge that there is right now. I mean, did you control AGI in the old days if you owned Encyclopedia Britannica? Did Encyclopedia Britannica control all the knowledge when it was published? It was the leading encyclopedia of its day. I don't know if you're old enough to know what an encyclopedia is or was.
I did have it. Having said that, I push back a bit on
Okay.
on equating AGI with the Encyclopedia Britannica, no matter how rudimentary a form
I'm
of
not equating them.
AGI you would say.
I'm not equating them. I'm saying the notion that any one person will, any one piece of software or one piece of technology will, quote, control it, or will be remotely isolated in its leadership. I don't believe it to be true. You only have to look at all the large language models right now, all the large models. Let's not call them language models anymore. But if you look at all the models, they're all about at a par. Everyone claims to be the leader. And in truth, they are leading in some areas, but lagging in others.
Yeah.
So,
But Larry, already we're seeing the threat of AI models that are biased towards a particular group or a particular school of thought.
absolutely. And you're going to see other models biased the other way, and you're going to see people call out that bias. That's the point of my argument. There is no such thing as a leader. There is going to be a very, very competitive environment. And AGI is an expression that has no validity at all, because it's going to be a form of intelligence that is different to human intelligence, and it's going to be a form of intelligence that may be highly useful to human intelligence and also highly destructive to human intelligence. It's going to be a medley of things owned by a medley of people, just as electricity, just as, electronic computers, and just as the atom bomb. It's going to be a very complex combination of multiple different things and multiple different owners. There's nobody going to own it, and there's nobody going to be the first to have it.
But the ones who have the atom bombs are the ones who control so much by default because of their possession of the atom.
And that's always been true. It's the ones who control fire, the ones who control the latest, I don't know, machine, who invented the spear, who invented the shield, but life goes on, and leadership changes, and technology continues to evolve. It's the human story. I mean, China controlled, the Chinese controlled fire a century, well, I don't know the exact amount of time,
gunpowder
before Europe, but did China overrun Europe? Look, the guy who overran Europe, the Khans, the Genghis Khan, all he controlled was a horse.
Yeah.
And he conquered half of Europe.
But it was an important means to control.
Yeah. But where is he in history today? Just another flare, just another bit of genius, and he was soon conquered back by what? I don't know. I mean, the Viennese figured, no, not the Viennese, actually, the Germans.
That was the Turks fighting the Viennese.
Yeah. So I'm skeptical that this is going to be the be all and end all. I think it's just going to be, a lot of organizations going to merge with that kind of level of knowledge as have emerged, and it's going to be very useful, and it's going to be supplanted by even more powerful and by new inventions and more powerful people.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of AGI and SGI and all the other
But that in itself is the big question about super alignment of AI with humanity. And I guess
Well,
I don't know. I mean, there's so many ways of looking at it, but I suppose in the end we'll only know where the chips fall once we go through that filter.
many chips will fall in many places. That's my point. I don't think we're going to see. Certainly, I don't think we're going to see Elon controlling AGI, and I certainly don't think we're going to see Sam Altman controlling AGI. You only have to look at right now who's on the leaderboard. I mean, there are like six, the frontier companies are not one company, and there isn't one emerging ahead of the others. There's just this constant, reemergence. And so when you take, Elon, you take the Google guys, you take Sam Altman's tribe, you take, I mean, Claude, these frontier, you really are dealing with pretty much equal weighted organizations.
Yeah.
And each one have their specialty, and it will be there will be a new, mark my words, there will be a new frontier model emerging in the coming year that will surprise everybody and will add to the leaderboard.
Ooh,
I don't
therefore,
know. I don't know. I don't know. And that's the point. But even if another one emerges, there's going to be new techniques, there are going to be new discoveries, there are going to be new inventions that will supplant a lot of what we've got in terms of technology in these models in very short order. It's the human story.
yeah. I hope we continue with that same story and not change it. Okay, so let's get back to that. So this is the last bit where Sam says, "I appreciate people saying what they want and think it enables people to resolve things or not, but Elon saying he wants the above um, is important context for Greg trying to figure out what he wants." And this is Greg saying, "I have great respect for Elon, but the way he cherry picked from my personal journal is beyond dishonest. Elon and we had agreed for a for-profit was the next step for OpenAI's mission. The context shows these snippets were actually about whether to accept Elon's draconian terms. And that's the diary entry. Elon, of course, then saying, um, in this context, they openly discuss their conspiracy to commit fraud and steal the charity. It's in the context of everything that we've been reading. So, as you said, it's still too early to kind of get a clear sense of what went down. We're getting these snippets, these bits, these slivers of indications, but until cross examination is on, and I think the case is scheduled to start in April, go to the jury trial, we'll get a clearer picture only then.
And that's right. And that's right. I think time will tell. But Royden, just to hammer home my point about there's so much discovery to be had in terms of AGI, our brain weighs a fraction, a tiny, tiny fraction of cortex or any of these gigantic training computers, these supercomputers, and yet we outthink it, currently 7 out of 10 times. So do you have any doubt that there's an enormous amount of discovery still to come?
Oh man, don't get me started on that because that's going into so many different theories and philosophies that I hold strong opinions about. But I agree with the crux of what you're saying. Um, whether it does turn out um, to the benefit of humanity, all of this competition in the field of AI, that to me is a question that we have to seriously consider at the risk of being specious. Um, I do not believe in transhumanism because I don't think it's feasible at the moment. I remember someone standing up at the recent Tesla shareholder meet last year and asking Elon about whether when we will be as a species able to upload our conscience um, to the cloud and then access it through a Neuralink and maybe move on as a sleeve of ourselves into an Optimus bot. And Elon was right to be skeptical and realistic. There are a lot of the danger is that we're entering a phase in society where it's going to get increasingly complex um, and nebulous, and intentions are going to get increasingly clouded, and it's going to become increasingly difficult to separate the good from the bad because the cadence at which this technology is developing is not is already leaving us breathless. Can you just imagine what's going to happen in the next 4 to 5 years? I think there are profound implications for society and us as a species. So I can only hope that we are chaperoned by the right individuals through this transition. And for the record, I would rather trust Elon than Sam Altman on this front.
Yeah, I mean I mean that accords with my own subjective views, but in terms of who I trust, on the other hand, I'm a lot more sanguine than you are. That's all I have to say, because it's in the nature of human competition, and I think we'll see. I think we'll be fine. That's my view. I may be wrong.
No, let's hope you're right, Larry, for all our sakes.
All right, let's see.
Okay, let's move on. We've got some interesting tidbits. This is a post from Adon Guajardo. I hope I haven't butchered his name, but this is the first mirrorless Tesla Cybercab on the streets of Austin, Texas.
Yeah, I saw that post. Trying to understand why all the excitement. Yeah,
So
I mean,
I suppose the argument was that eventually, Tesla Cybercabs would not need mirrors because, or Tesla vehicles would not need mirrors because the cameras were
right,
good enough to look all around. They would be
right.
driverless. You wouldn't
Yeah,
need a steering wheel and all of that. So I guess most of the excitement around these images is because here's another little signpost along the way to autonomy.
we read the tea leaves all the time for absolutely no purpose. We know the Cybercab's not going to have mirrors, and despite my great friend and for whom I have enormous respect, Farzad telling us it's going to have a steering wheel. It's not going to have a steering wheel. I mean, it is not a vehicle designed to be driven by human beings. And it's possible that, so I've said all along that Tesla could and should make a vehicle similar to the Cybercab for people to buy and drive, but that I don't think it's in the cards for Tesla. I think they're moving away from building cars for people. If they were going to build cars for people, then a Cybercab size vehicle would have been on the market already, should have been on the market already. And Elon, even though he agreed in that famous meeting written up in his biography to adding a steering wheel and pedals and provide a new, lower cost vehicle. He in his heart was not committed, and he soon changed direction, fired half the management, and went down this path. So, no, I don't think it's going to have a steering wheel, and I fully expected it to emerge in the marketplace without mirrors and without a steering wheel, and I think we're on course. The question is, how soon? And we know that start of production, which is a formal term, is set for April of this year. That probably means the end of April. We also know that start of production doesn't mean we're going to see 5,000 cars a week from day one. In fact, we're probably not going to see that until the end of the year, if by the end of the year. And we're only going to see very few, very sparse number emerge in the first couple of months. This is normal. And they're going to emerge without steering wheel and without mirrors.
Yeah. So my 2 cents. A, I don't see any reason why people cannot still buy cybercabs for personal use, because they'll still be open to. I mean, eventually, I don't suppose that'll happen in the first couple of years, because there are other Tesla models that you certainly can. But I think eventually by 2028, once the market is saturated to a reasonable level, I think there is a strong possibility that, because it's just a wonderful two-seater. It's just a car for a couple. If you want a car for a family, you would obviously go to other models of Tesla with the driverless features. And B, this whole discussion around um, steering wheels in the cybercabs. If you're testing a cybercab on various roads, you'd want to have access to the steering wheel and pedals in order to deal with any unforeseen circumstance. That doesn't mean that Tesla's going to produce cars, cybercabs, with the steering wheel to this big idea from Farzad.
Yeah, so the more interesting question for me is whether or not cybercabs will be available to buy for the public. And I think there are reasons certainly in the first 2 years, to say no. And those reasons are because they are going to be a significant competitive advantage for Tesla, a very significant competitive advantage. So I think that in the first couple of years, at the very least, we won't see cybercabs being offered to individuals. That's just my view. I could be wrong.
I guess we're all clutching at straws eventually. It's going to be up to Elon and Tesla to decide.
Your guess is as good as mine.
I know. But all this speculation is fun, as long as it doesn't go off the rails.
And pretty pointless, but okay, we can have.
Yeah. It's just a bit of fun, I guess. This is an interesting post from Elon, because it gives us a timeline uh, and use cases for AI chips, Tesla AI chips. He says AI 4 by itself will achieve self-driving safety levels very far above humans. AI 5 will make the cars almost perfect and greatly enhance Optimus. AI 6 will be for Optimus and data centers. I'm presuming he means orbital data centers. AI 7/Dojo 3 will be space-based AI compute. So this was a bit confusing to me. I was curious to know your thoughts, because my understanding was that AI 6 would really hit a cadence that they would need to put into orbit by the end of next year, end of 2027. That doesn't mean that they just can't put up chips and AI chips in orbit on V3 satellites, Starlink satellites, to test right away in the second half of this year and the first half of next, with AI 4 and AI 5.
The back half of this year seems a little early because AI 5, you're talking about using AI 4 chips.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
just
mean,
as a test bed, because
yeah,
I was speaking a couple of months back to a former SpaceX engineer who's now founder of a bot company, a robotic startup in New York, and he was telling me about the experience and the way they go about things at SpaceX, which is they literally have the liberty, not just the ability, but the liberty to try out whatever they want. And Elon is so supportive of that. So they were like, okay, you want to try this out? Go do it. Fail fast.
well, I mean, one of the considerations are that the AI 4 chip and the AI 5 are really not optimized for space-based compute. So the memory and compute configurations would differ in
Mhm.
space than they would here on Earth, and 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 so and the power consumption is a very, very important consideration. Heating and cooling is a very important consideration, and that changes the architecture of the packaging as well as the configuration of the memory and the processors. So I think while they may experiment with AI 4 and ultimately AI 5, I think the optimization that needs to take place is what he's talking about. And so when you're going to spend billions and billions, or maybe and potentially trillions of dollars in putting massive compute into the sky, you want to optimize that. So it's an open question. I mean, one of the things we do know is that Tesla's chips, Tesla's processors that they've developed for the car, both AI, starting with AI 3, is really highly optimized for the vehicle. And by that I mean to say it's incredibly energy optimized, and we see that. I mean, the NVIDIA chips that are being used in the car right now are dramatically more expensive, but also dramatically more energy, has dramatically higher energy consumption. And so that's what makes the AI series of chips so invaluable to Tesla, and invaluable to Tesla in the robot. And again, the chip needs to be optimized for the robot versus space-based compute. So I think what Elon is referencing is optimization rather than sole use. So I think definitely AI 5 will be used for Optimus, um, and then will be perfected in AI 6 for Optimus and for data centers. And then AI 7 will be space based. And what we see by AI 7 is that probably it's not going to be sold as a chip, it's probably going to be sold as a wafer, optimized or manufactured as a wafer, optimized for wafer installation on the satellite, and that's why the reference to Dojo.
All right. So you've done a deep analysis on the Tesla Robotaxi, the rollout and the business model and all of that. Can you
Well, let's
take
be
us
honest,
through your
it
thoughts?
wasn't my deep analysis.
Okay.
This was deep analysis done by an analyst,
Uh-huh.
and I'm sort of looking at what he's done, and I've
Right.
taken it and I've analyzed it, and I've also added my own color to it.
Right.
But a lot of this is, and I don't necessarily agree with everything, but a lot
Hmm.
of it. So I don't take credit for it all, but Pierre Ferragu is one of the best Wall Street analysts, I think, and
Yeah.
has a very deep knowledge of Tesla, of the vehicle market, and has done some incredible analysis over the years. So he came out on a Robotaxi analysis, and I thought it was very well worth looking at because it was incredibly well done. And he really did sort of multi-factor, multivariate analysis that came up with where he thinks it's going to go. And so I thought it's worth analyzing. And he published it. He made it public.
Yeah. So please take us through your thoughts. I'm going to let me know when you need me to switch between slides.
Okay, so this is this really sums it up. You know, I gave away the whole secret on the first slide, and this is really a graph of his potential revenues over the coming number of years. And in the black, the sawtooth shape in the top black shows what he thinks Uber's revenue is going to be over the next 5 years. So you see, you know, relatively gentle growth. It's seasonal. He shows it for each for each year over the next 5 years. You see this little sawtooth growth that shows, you know, a much slower growth than Uber's had in the past, but shows that Uber is the leading, from the dollar point of view, is still the leading, is right now, and will remain over the next 5 years, the leading ride share vendor, because they have the market penetration, they have the existing infrastructure, they have the drivers, and the drivers being, you know, people who are driving on a piecework kind of basis is their secret, because they can feed in cars and very high demand periods of time, and then they don't have to pay those drivers or pay the cost of those cars during the periods of lull, which is overnight, and also sometimes in the lull periods during the day. And then compared to that, and that's the black sawtooth, you have this red line that's rising very fast towards the end of the 5 years. That's what he foresees for Tesla's revenue from rideshare. And the principal reason that they're going to enjoy this rising revenue is cost. And I'll get into that in a minute. And then the blue line is what he sees for Waymo. He sees Waymo's growth being restricted by their business model. And I'll get into that as well. So I'm bearing the lead here. I mean, I'm advertising the lead here, and that is Tesla Robotaxi is going to be the fastest growing. It's going to steal a lot from Uber's revenue. Waymo is going to fall behind, and that's just their lot in life.
Okay. So shall we move to the next slide?
Yeah, let's move on. So the principal reason for Tesla's growth is its margins. By 2030, it's going to have a margin of about 35% compared to Uber's, you know, significantly lower margins in the 7.9% margin, which is like a fifth of the margin. And then you've got Waymo and others like Waymo, and I'm going to explain that in a moment, who really just chug along at break even. They really consume capital rather than generate capital. So let's just move on, and we can move quite quickly now because I've kind of buried the information. So it's the unit economics that count. The unit economics are quite simple. Waymo doesn't have to buy the car. Waymo doesn't have to pay the driver. The passenger's paying the driver. The passenger's paying for the car. The driver of the car owns the car or rents the car or leases the car. He's taking the risk, therefore has to get out on the road, has to be, you know, a servant to Uber's demands in order to make the money. And that's Uber's business model. And that's what really propels Uber. The problem for Waymo is they have to buy, not only do they have to buy the car from another manufacturer, they have to buy the equipment, the compute equipment, the sensor equipment, and they have to install it in the car. All of that costs money, which means they have to pay a lot more for the car than Uber, who doesn't have to buy the car at all. And they have to pay a lot more for the car than Tesla, who manufactures the car and designs a car that is, street ready as a rent-a-car, as a rent-a-drive, as a drive share vehicle. And so that vehicle costs less than a third of the price of the Waymo vehicle. And beyond that, Waymo really has to own the vehicle during downtimes as much as uptimes. And that's the biggest problem, that Waymo can't surge vehicles for demand, and they can't not pay for the vehicles when there's no demand. So they face this deadly situation that they can't meet the competition with Uber. They're going to be more expensive than Uber simply because Uber has this ability to surge whenever they need demand and not pay for the cost of the vehicles when they don't have demand. And the secret behind Tesla's ability to do the same is the fact that Tesla owners of ordinary retail vehicles can also surge their cars for high demand periods. So you have this built-in capability, not yet proven by Tesla, to be able to surge in the same way that Uber, proven, can surge. The ability to prove that business model by Tesla is what everything hangs on in terms of profitability for Tesla. Tesla's met half the challenge by producing a car that costs less than a third of what it's going to cost Waymo or any other competitor to put a car on the road to compete, other than Chinese manufacturers who followed the lead that Tesla has. And we know that Xipeng at least is one who are doing exactly that. Yeah. So that's the stage that we're talking about. And in the US stage, discount the Chinese operators completely, not so much in Canada, probably in Canada or in Europe, but certainly in the United States. So we move on to the next slide. So the three catalysts that enable the Robotaxi ramp, it's removing safety drivers in Austin, unsupervised FSD scalability, and Cybercab production rate. Everybody knows those three, but there are two more that, and those are the three that are mentioned in the paper. I believe that there are actually two others. A fourth one that's not mentioned by New Street in its analysis, but it's essential, is proof of ability to incorporate Tesla owners' vehicles in peak hours. That is the huge issue for the very reasons I've just discussed at great length, and it's unproven yet. We don't know how that's going to work. We can postulate that, it could be a very, very profitable thing for an owner of a Tesla vehicle that's sitting in the garage, just as mine sits 90% of the day, and particularly at peak hours. I have two Teslas. There's hardly a time when more than one is out of the driveway, and there's only a very short period of time that's out of the driveway. And also the other thing is logistics. Tesla has this gigantic logistic footprint across the United States of America, in fact, across the world. There's no major center in the country that doesn't have at least one major Tesla infrastructure installation. That beats by far where Uber stands or where Waymo stands or is likely to stand in the next couple of years. And that's going to be critical for two things. A, for managing a fleet, but also for managing vehicles coming in from retail owners. So all of that's very important, but of course we still have to prove all of the first three catalysts, and then these other two catalysts count. So that's my addition to New Street's analysis. So let's move on. So price elasticity is everything. The degree to which Tesla can reduce the cost of the robotaxi, of the drive, the product. And so we've seen Uber doing 3x growth over the past decade due to their ability to disrupt, what was the rental car or the taxi vehicle, and grow the market very dramatically as a result. New Street postulates that there's going to be a 4.4, almost 5x growth in the next 5 years from Tesla, the next 10 years from Tesla, because, actually they had 5 years, they're only analyzing 5 years, because they're going to drop the price even further than Uber has been able to do. I think that the growth is going to be even greater, because I think that the number of use cases that open up at these prices, and it's not in my presentation, but it's my belief that New Street hasn't explored all the use cases that could be opened up. I mean, one point that I make in discussing this with peers is that a use case that hasn't begun to be explored is long road trips. And the competition with short haul, commuter airlines, this is going to change the game. The fact that we'll be able to make a trip from, I live in Cary, North Carolina, I'll be able to go to Charlotte and use a drive share, because it's going to beat the cost of me driving my own car.
Absolutely.
And it's much
the
more
comfort, the ease.
Yeah, and when I
everything.
get there, I've got other robotaxis I can order. I can, there is even a case to be made for going on a trip from where I live to South Texas to watch the Starship take off, which I do. I did 3 times last year. I'm probably going to do it 5 times this year.
Yeah,
I
that's on
mean,
my bucket list.
so much better than flying, and so much cheaper, and I don't even need my own car. So all I'm trying to say is that there is a plethora, and those are only 2 use cases. There are many more use cases that are going to be opened up. So I think the 4.4x is I think it may be double that, and that may be a reach. But I get the sense that we're going to see this explode, and we're going to see the nature of travel change in the United States of America. So let's go to the next slide. This is New Street's slide, actually. It's his direct slide. And this slide just shows how dramatic the growth of the market's going to take place. And there are 2 curves. The one is those bars rising and rising and rising, and they separated between the bottom set, the light shade is all of Uber, the slightly darker shade, the smaller number of bars, you may want to point to them, they are actually Waymo and others. And then the darker bars, at the top bars, the ones that are growing so rapidly, are Tesla's Cybercab, Robotaxi. And why are they rising so rapidly? Why are we seeing that curve? Because look at the line. Look at the line is showing you the cost per mile and how it is declining significantly. And that decline is what gives to the rise of volume. And I'm saying that the decline may be greater, but what is definitely going to be greater is those bars are going to rise much faster. So that's New Street's view. My view is sort of, can imagine larger growth. So let's move on. So capital efficiency is what gives Tesla 7x advantage over Waymo. I discussed the Waymo model a little bit earlier. We don't have to belabor it, but basically, the problem for Waymo, I mean, it's really weird. Because Waymo can't feed additional supply in at peak hours of demand, they have to only supply sort of they're only competitive in the sort of low demand period of the day. So the irony is Waymo do better by opening more cities and not expanding beyond, a few hundred cars in each city. Why? Because that's when they can actually be competitive and they don't lose too much money during the peak hours or during the hours where there's no demand at all, the night hours, for example. Because if they try to expand their fleet to deal with the peak hour demand, they just have more and more cars costing them money sitting in parking lots or sitting parked at night. So the irony is it pays them more to expand their market to multiple cities and small number of cars than a few cities with a large number of cars, or even the same cities with a large number of cars. And so the Waymo model to deal with demand, they need $700 million of capex, and Tesla only need $100 million of capex. And why? Because Tesla will supply a small number of much less expensive cars, and they will use cars from their user fleet in demand periods. So that's really that's the problem that Waymo has, and it's the problem for every OEM vendor out there.
It just puts it in perspective.
It's a capital trap. So let's move on. This is another one of New Street's slides, and we won't go into it in great detail. I really recommend you sign up with New Street. They have a post on X. Just follow their posts on X, and then you'll find a sign-up sheet, and then you'll go to download it yourself. So I recommend you do it because there are many slides. So it's a big deck, and it goes into great detail. You can actually critique, line item by line item, the dollars and cents of income and cost. But what's interesting about this slide is this little graph in the middle and on the left. And what's interesting about that graph is that the red shaded area of the graph is the demand during the day. The green shaded area of the graph is the demand in peak hours. And you can see how those peak hours, really lift the revenue by a very significant amount, doubles the revenue. But what's interesting, doubles the miles, I should say, doubles the number of trips. But what's interesting about that is that the price being charged in the red areas is much lower than the price you can charge in the green areas. So you want to be green. And that's the value of the Tesla owners being able to feed their cars into the Tesla fleet, or the Uber owners being able to feed their cars into the Tesla fleet. And that's really the trap that the Waymo type vendors are going to have in their fleets. Make sense? All right, let's move on.
So hang on. When do you have any guess on when you expect Tesla to allow Tesla owners to put their cars into the network?
I think it'll be sometime mid-2026.
Okay.
Sorry, mid-20. I've got my years wrong. I'm still in 2025 in my head.
Yeah.
Mid-2027.
Yeah, right.
I think it'll be a while. We may see experiments during this year. And then if things go very well, it may be earlier. But I expect that they'll only start experiments once they have got, driverless cars in 3 to 5 cities.
I haven't seen much on the front of Tesla expanding or putting in place the support infrastructure for the Robotaxi or the Cybercab fleet, even Tesla's own cars. When do you expect to see that? Things like those robotic stations to clean up the cars and service them, etc.
I don't expect to see a robotic station until late this year. I think that they're going to use manual methods. They're going to use a lot of human support because it doesn't matter. This is all trial and experimenting. It's learning what are the cleaning issues, what are the charging issues. They probably won't have induction charges this year.
Oh, really? Okay.
While scale
Not
is
even
small,
testing them out.
while scale is small, it pays to do this all by hand because you're not looking to make a profit. You're looking to learn the business.
Right.
And so I think automation, you remember the algorithm. Remember the algorithm. The last thing you do is automate.
Yeah.
You start by questioning every requirement. And we're in that stage right now. And then we'll start automating. Then once we've questioned the requirements and stripped them out, then we can start thinking about automation. And then we can start, testing automation. And then, we can perfect it. So automation is the very last thing you do.
So that's going to be a clear signal that the ramp up is about to happen.
No, they're going to ramp up before they automate.
Okay.
They're going to have a lot of human work when they're in the ramp itself. Right. So this is the slide that talks about their Waymo's geographic strategy is their structural constraints. And you just see that they're plateauing already in San Francisco and moving on to other sites. It's unlikely that they can expand much further. Their participation in the market seems to be stuck at around the 20% mark. The constraints are unit economics. The cars just cost too much money, and they don't have the means to feed new cars in for peak demand, other than by just simply subcontracting to Uber. And so their strategy is expand to many cities and partner with many partners, and Uber in particular. So this creates a years-long window for Tesla to establish market leadership. That's the implication from this. All right, let's move on. So this is the final slide. This is the takeaway, and this is my takeaway, not New Street's takeaway, but based upon what they're saying, I see the Robotaxi, the capital value, the share price, the enterprise value that it'll create for Tesla in 2030 will be approximately $500 billion. And that's at a very modest 35 times EBIT. They're currently many fold higher than that, and will probably be so by the 2030s. But so the value add to the share price could be much higher than that. But this is a modest estimate. The Uber, the Uber enterprise value by that date could be about $360 billion. And it's about 20 times EBIT because it'll be a relatively slow growing, or certainly relative to Tesla slow growing. And by the way, this doesn't include all the use cases that I believe New Street is not factoring into their analysis.
Okay.
And then finally, other than to say that when the cost goes down, usage goes up, and that covers that sort of other use cases, but I don't think they realize just how broad those use cases become and how big that number becomes. And then finally, Waymo, they value at $40 billion, and I think that's overvalued. And I will tell you that's less than half the value at which Waymo have raising money in the marketplace right now. So the lesson learned here is don't put money with Waymo if you can possibly avoid it.
To me, what stands out is the thinking that Uber's still going to be around in 2030.
Yes, and so that that sort of counters the narrative amongst the Tesla pundits or the Tesla bulls that Uber's dead. I think that it's an interesting observation from New Street. There's a lot of, there's a sense that their position in the marketplace will hold for a long time, even in the face of very strong price competition. That's their view. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I mean, there's a lot to be said, but I think that if you look at Betamax versus VHS, that story, told us that the market leader could disappear overnight because of pricing. And so who knows? Time will tell.
Not just pricing, but also quality of service, safety, removing the driver from the vehicle, which is a big factor in so many countries around the world, not just America.
Well, the
I think
driver
there's a
from the
lot more.
vehicle, so we must understand the driver from the vehicle is going to become a feature for Uber as well and for Waymo and for other companies. The driver from the vehicle is not, I think, the determinative factor here.
No, surely not. But
The
it's
driver
one of the
from
factors.
the driver from the vehicle and the ability to scale.
Mm.
The two are very important. Without the ability to scale, you don't have a competitive product. You don't have a moat. The moat is twofold. And so just taking the driver out of the vehicle is not the most important message I got from New Street is that that's the biggest single factor in the P&L. Because if you can't take the driver out of the vehicle and scale at peak hours, then your vehicle fleet has to be at the peak hour scale. Otherwise, and then you can't make sense of it financially. So,
Yeah.
Even in simple terms, in the simplest possible terms, you need to be an automobile manufacturer that is producing a really inexpensive vehicle and has a very large fleet of privately owned vehicles that can be fed into the mix at peak hours. And that's the magic formula. And that's the message that we're taught. That's the lesson that we've been taught by Pierre and New Street.
Yeah. I think it's a very important message. And in this grand discussion and debate online around whether Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi is putting up a brave front, or whether he's, I don't know, maybe selling dreams, pipe dreams to investors. I think the practicality and these advantages that Tesla has definitely need to be taken into consideration,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
without them, you really can't get a true understanding of this inflection point whenever it hits, whether it's the end of this year or the middle of next year.
And we just have to add the caution that that model has not yet been proven.
Yeah,
So we'll see. Time will tell.
we'll see.
And by
Yeah.
the way, one of the reasons that I am opposed to these businesses that want to build a car fleet that as shepherds, where they'll provide their cars, is they're living the trap. They're living within the trap. The trap is their cars won't be competitive. Their economics won't be competitive during the non-peak hours. They'll only
You
be
mean within the Robotaxi network or without?
if you're a private owner of a Robotaxi or a private owner of a Tesla car,
Hmm.
with the idea of building a fleet to provide these cars to Tesla, I'm saying that's a losing proposition because you're in the same trap that Waymo in. It's actually you're in the obverse trap to what Waymo in. Your cars only become valuable to Tesla during peak hours,
Right.
which means that during normal business hours, you don't have a
Waymo.
customer.
Yeah.
So you have to
Unless in the long run, private ownership of cars drops precipitously, and then the demand, even in the off-peak hours, for a robotaxi network
But
car will increase.
why wouldn't Tesla simply provide that?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that this whole idea only works as if you've got one provider for the standard hours with a sufficient number of vehicles to give really good service, and then have an elasticity of demand that at peak hours can feed in that demand because you've got that additional charge that you can make in those peak hours that you can share equally between the network provider and the spare car provider.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't work. So you need a base load provider and you need an extended provider where that extension is just supplemental income to that spare provider. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And that's what gives Tesla an enormous competitive advantage. But if you become a provider of that supplemental demand, you can't make money out of it unless it's simply reducing the cost to you of ownership of the car.
Yeah.
If I already own the car and it's in my garage and I'm going to have it anyway, having it go out by itself at night, without me getting involved, it just picks up, goes off, gets cleaned, sends out, comes back to the depot, gets cleaned, gets sent home, and is in my garage by 6 o'clock in the morning when I need it. It's perfect. Now, instead of that car costing me $20,000-$30,000 a year, or $15,000-$20,000, whatever the cost of owning a car is, I'm now free of that expense, and I may even be making a profit on top of it.
Indeed.
But that's not the shepherd business model. And so that's why shepherds fail. They fail for the very same reason Waymo fails.
Yeah. Interesting.
And
of course, I also don't buy into this whole kind of argument that maybe Tesla will allow robotaxi cars into the Uber network. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, it makes sense to me.
Please explain.
So if Waymo go and buy a retail Tesla vehicle and pay for the FSD subscription, why would they not be able to rent it out on their network?
My argument against that would be, why would Tesla allow that when they're wrapping up their own network?
Because it's not competitive to Tesla.
But wouldn't Tesla need everything in its own network first?
No, but it buys a retail car that Tesla manufactures out of Texas or out of Fremont. Just buys it retail. Tesla makes a big profit. Tesla makes a profit from the FSD rental.
You think Tesla could sell it at a premium to Uber?
No, why? They're selling their cars at a premium for a start. And as long as, look, what they may charge a premium on is the use of FSD. They're going to a lease-only FSD. And so in leasing that FSD, they can actually determine, who's the owner of the car. And if it happens to be Uber, maybe they'll charge a little bit more. That's a possibility. And that may be one of the reasons for the lease of FSD.
Okay.
But if Uber can make money on a self-drive Tesla, why not? Tesla's doing well out of the transaction. And that doesn't defeat Tesla's own business model. Elon has never been coy about. No,
Yeah,
let me rephrase that. He's always been happy to supply his competitors.
yeah,
Always.
always. It's just competitors being reticent in taking his advice or
Yes.
taking his lead.
Yes. Yes.
Always. And it's
Yeah.
never made sense. Of course. I mean, it
Yeah.
also depends on where the competitor is in the evolution curve of their own technology and whether they're at a place where they can um, maximize whatever they're
Yeah.
getting from Tesla.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. This is going to be so fascinating to watch,
Yes.
Larry, over the
Yes.
next,
Yes.
2 to 3 years. I suppose next year onwards, because that's
Look,
when,
it's a business strategist's dream
yeah,
to look at the pieces on the chessboard and decide what the moves are going to be. And like any chess pundit, the moves are going to be different to what one forecasts. But it's really fun. And when you watch the moves of the master, you can also critique those moves
yeah,
because you always know better than the master, right? So I think this is one of the great privileges of life right now, is watching
yeah,
this man, you know, make move after move after move
yeah.
and listen to all the criticisms by all the pundits. Anyway, thanks very much. This was fun.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on to some interesting political moves, chess moves around Greenland that the Trump administration is making. Trump is trying to play 4D chess. To his credit, of course, one has to say that if you need to look back at Trump 45 to really get a sense of the genesis, or maybe even earlier to Trump's own beliefs, to the genesis of what's happening. But the fact that he's now turning the tariff screws on European allies is, oh man, this is fascinating. He says, so this is a post that he put out on Truth Social, and then I think it was reshared by the White House, which says, now after centuries, it is time for Denmark to give back. World peace is at stake. China and Russia want Greenland, and there is not a thing that Denmark can do about it. The United States of America is immediately open to negotiation with Denmark and slash or any of these countries, quote unquote. And the countries in question are Denmark, of course, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland. Boy, oh boy, Trump really likes to set the cat amongst the pigeons. But the fact that he's threatened tariffs, I think it's from the beginning of February, goes to show how serious he is about and the sense of urgency, right?
Yeah. So, as always, when Trump starts down a path, it's very frightening. This one is particularly frightening to me because it sets him on a path to, you know, yet another confrontation with Europe. And it's very interesting that in his confrontations with Europe, the rhetoric starts at red hot levels. And then, and at least in the past, it's always resolved in the most amicable of ways. I think about the NATO fracas and I think about the original tariff fracas. In each case, the rhetoric was red hot at the outset from both sides. I mean, he initiates it at the highest levels of red, and they respond at the highest levels of red, and yet they seem to have worked it out in the last two cases. And I should have added Ukraine to that. NATO and
Yeah,
Ukraine are really two separate subjects.
yeah. But I think that's also down to the fact that European countries really don't have much elbow room, wiggle room, or much of a bargaining chip right now,
Well,
either on
yeah, I mean
defense or
that's
energy or
part.
geostrategy.
Yep, that's part of it. Look, the rhetoric around Iceland, like all of
Greenland.
these, I mean Greenland, like all of, and I'll talk about Iceland in a minute, but like all of these Trump issues actually has a very deep strategic motivation. So if you look at the map, you'll understand that Greenland sits directly on the front porch of Russia and where Russia's Pacific Fleet lives. And it sits directly in the path of the obvious path of either Russia or Russia and China, marching on or bombing on the United States of America.
Yeah.
Now, there's precedent for this. In the Second World War, Britain granted the United States land rights, not land rights, they gave over title to their bases in the mid-Atlantic, one in Iceland, and there were several bases. I forget the exact location of each, but they made over them in response to American aid. In fact, Churchill gave the bases up to America before America committed to a particular set of aids, and he made that gesture in order to help Roosevelt help the UK, because there was a lot of America first and anti-British sentiment at that time in the United States, and it was tough for Roosevelt to support Churchill at first. Anyway, so that precedent exists. Trump is not an historian. He doesn't really read the histories, but he has an incredible sense of strategic advantage. And he understands that Greenland is strategically one of the most important components of any future, confrontation between the powers. And it's not as much a European issue as it is an American issue. And America is the guardian of Europe, ultimately.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's become more so since Europe is kind of in the last 20 years where they, have just given up defending themselves. There's a change in Europe now, but it's going to be some years before Europe is able to stand on its own. Years,
sure.
If it ever is.
Decades, I would say.
Because their economy is in such bad shape. Anyway, the point is, however, Trump being Trump, instead of going to his allies and saying, listen, guys, we've got to think this through, Greenland is the strategic nexus. We need U.S. fully invested there. We need U.S. to be in control. Shouldn't we think about doing something?
But to his defense, I think he tried that in his first term. I think it was in 2019 when he cancelled. He was working with the Denmark prime minister at the time, and he was reaching out to them. And then I think, if I remember correctly, he cancelled his meeting with the Danish prime minister because of differences over this. So it's not something new.
But it's something consistent with his approach to the world. So what I'm saying he did now is he did in 2019 as well. First confront, demand, insist, and then, be very nice after. So, but, the question is, when does that strategy fail, and what happens
and
when
backfire.
And backfire? Yeah. So
Macron is now, to your point, Macron is now threatening to invoke this. This is the EU Protection Against Coercion. It's called the bazooka, where the EU gets together and levies equal reciprocal tariffs in some form or the other on America. It's never been done before.
Yeah.
But
well,
Macron
see
suggesting this is interesting.
Yeah, we'll see how the negotiation plays out, whether he can carry the day again. He's managed to do so quite often. But if they call his bluff and it gets really bad, that's not good. That's very not good. So it makes me intensely uncomfortable. But
Because it's Trump also in a way painting himself into a corner.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It's Trump in a way painting himself into a corner. Because if the EU,
this won't be the first
together
corner
take a
he's
stand.
painted. This won't be the first. There are four
Yeah.
corners in a room, and there are many rooms in this house, and so he's painted himself into many corners, and somehow he seems to wiggle out of it.
Yes.
There are a few corners he hasn't got out of. He hasn't been able to stop the Ukraine war. He's made some incredible moves, but we're still there. He did manage to stop the Israel war. He did manage to put the brakes on Iran. He's got a lot of balls still juggling in terms of
And domestically as well.
Yeah. So we have
my concern is that he's taken on too much at the same time.
Yeah, but look at the results.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the Democrats are saying it's terrible, the world's coming to an end, and we're all going to die. But if you look at the actual results, so far he's done pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And we're not all going to die. And, and here's the most important part of it: is the economy is on a tear.
Yes.
We are on a tear. The Democrats will tell you the economy's in tatters and everything's wrong, but actually we're on a tear. And so by the end of this year, I don't know about midterms, but by the end of this year, it'll become clear we're on a growth path that is probably going to be historic in terms of size and breadth. So we'll see. Time will tell.
One last thing I wanted to pick your brain on, Larry, is this latest article of yours on X. If you dedicate a few minutes to that, I think this is a very important subject and very timely. You argue that we do need billionaires, 71% self-made, endless grit, and the industries they built for all of us in America.
I mean, I encapsulate my argument by saying, look, 71% of the billionaires are self-made people. They're people who came up from nothing or relatively nothing. And what did they do? They created the modern US economy. They built huge businesses and they pay a huge amount of tax and they support an enormous number of people. You would be amazed at the percentage of the GDP that they generate. You would be amazed at the amount of taxes they pay. You would be amazed at the amount of people they employ. And I've got tables for all of these. You could flip to some of these tables. They really encapsulate the argument. So
I'll leave a link to this article in the
the point I make in the article is that they are driving the growth in the United States. They're driving employment in the United States. They are driving the fix of the deficit. If it weren't for them, our deficit would be incredibly high. And so what I argue is that everybody tells us how terrible it is that the billionaires have got this amount of money and so on and so forth. What they don't look at is they don't look at what the billionaires have done for the country. So it's not what they can do for themselves. It's what they've done for us that I argue we should be grateful for.
Conversely, none of this would have happened if America were not to be a free market economy.
Absolutely right. Look at Europe. Look at Europe. What have they invented? They've invented bureaucracy. What have they invented? They've invented constraints. What have they invented? They've invented, massive amount of just red tape. Red tape, this is the biggest product that Europe generates is red tape. And they pay a lot of money for it. It's a very expensive product. It's incredibly devastating to their economy.
And their societies.
and society.
And if you
So,
look at the flywheel of innovation, it's the money from these billionaires that gets pumped into new ideas because the government is not going to nowhere close pumping that sort of money as private equity
well, it's
can
not the government's
into
job,
innovation.
right? That's
Exactly.
not the government, it's the market's job to do that. And
Yeah.
yet these billionaires have been so incredibly productive with the capital that they've been able to raise, and they've generated some gigantic. And then the percentage of startups that become billionaires is like I actually quoted 0.0001, 3 or 4 zeros to the one, and the number that fail is incredibly high. So the few that succeed make
Yeah.
this enormous impact on our society, because those few that succeed are the ones that have generated the brilliant product, the brilliant solution, the added value to society, and we as society just, we all win from it.
Why do you think there is this level of discomfort, hatred, whatever you may call it, in
Well,
America
it's
with
envy,
billionaires?
it's envy, and
Envy and sloth
yeah, and left
because you can't
wing,
make it on your own.
extreme left wing politics, or left wing politics, because it's all extreme today, is the politics of envy. I mean, ultimately, we learnt about the politics of envy. It leads to dictatorship and poverty. I mean, point. I mean, it's just how it is. That's just how it is.
Really bad outcomes for societies and individuals.
Yes.
Well, let's hope America doesn't go there. Thank you, Larry. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Always a pleasure. Till next time.